Hello. So good evening and welcome. This is a special initiative by SEBI and Lokmanya Seva Sangha. We're going to have some lectures. This basically is a global initiative under World Investor Week. So we'll be having some sessions on that on concept. Today is the first session where we'll have a discussion on wills and trust. And on Wednesday, we have a session where we'll be talking about G20 and its economic impact on India. So both are interesting sessions. So before that, we'll start our session with our normal prayer. Before that, I request our chairman Uday sir to take our distinguished speaker today to garland Lokmanya Tilak's statue. I request everyone to please stand up for the prayer. I request our chairman Uday sir to please get the distinguished speaker on the dais. It's an honor to introduce today's speaker. Mr. Deepak has tons of experience in the financial markets. He was earlier working with Fidelity, erstwhile with Nippon, and currently more than 9 years with Franklin Templeton Asset Management. He's an MBA, he's an FRM, he's done his LLB, so he's basically from different walks of life. He knows how the legal concept is, he knows how the investment concept is, he knows MBA in terms of finance and marketing both. So none better than Mr. Deepak to guide you today on the most important topic about wills. Because this is the common problem where a lot of senior citizens are facing today. Not only in Ville-Parle but across the country. The scenario now is children are abroad, either in the US or some part of the world. Husband and wife only staying here alone. They don't know what to do with their wealth. The children are not bothered about the parents' wealth here because we don't have time. So this has become a very common phenomena, and there have been clients, since I and Dhruv both are advisors, we're having this common problem where at least we get 2 clients a week who come and say, आता मी काय करू, आमच्या मुलांना आमचा पैसा अजिबात नको आहे. मग आम्ही त्यांना मस्करीत सांगतो आम्हाला दत्तक घेतलं तरी चालेल, पण that cannot be the solution for it. So based on this common problem which exists right now, Mr. Deepak is going to throw more light and he'll share what exactly one needs to do in all these problems. So without wasting much time, I request Mr. Deepak to please enlighten us. Before that, I'll request Uday sir to please welcome our speaker for the day with a small memento of Lokmanya Seva Sangha. Yeah, whatever you're comfortable. You stand there, you can come here, whatever you're comfortable. Yeah, so I'll get the mic for you. So over to Mr. Deepak now.
Good evening. First of all, I get completely filled up with excitement when I see people back in a room, although it has almost been 1.5 years since we are back to routine sessions where we meet people in person. But 2 years of COVID were so excruciating and so boring for me that I really cherish when I see people, when you can get feedback and when you can see people in real time and interact with them. So first I would like to thank Chairman sir also for facilitating this entire session and giving us this opportunity. I would also like to thank you sir for giving us the opportunity, as well as Mr. Vengankar, who gave a fantastic introduction for this session. So yes, first of all, we are doing this in a very special week. This week, I hope my voice is clear, there's no echo. Right. So we are doing this session in a very special week. This is a week of World Investor Week. This is. So I'll quickly touch upon this background of this. So what we are, the chat that we are going to have today is under the initiative of Investor Awareness Program. Okay. This initiative started close to 7-8 years ago by SEBI, who's the regulator that our financial industry has and which falls under the Ministry of Finance. The idea behind investor awareness programs was that generally it was seen that the general literacy level on financial products of Indians on an average was little lesser than what it used to be among the Western or the Americans, etc., right? That was where it all began. Almost 7-8 years have passed. A lot of such programs happen. So I'll also say, in case of investor awareness, it has multiple parts. For example, did anyone saw the India-Australia match yesterday on Jio? Yeah. So on Jio also you must have seen an ad that somebody is looking at कि ये मेरी dream car है. So his friend says कि why don't you make it your goal with an SIP? And he says मेरे पास इतने पैसे नहीं हैं. And he said SIP में तू थोड़ा-थोड़ा करके start कर सकता है. So those ads, or if you remember Sachin Tendulkar, Dhoni ads, कि mutual fund सही है, all of that were under this initiative. And the idea of this initiative is just to improve your awareness. At the end of this session, and I'm sure you have been through such sessions before, at the end of this session, there is no product pitch that comes. The entire objective of this session is to improve your awareness. So we initially started with some very basic concepts of mutual fund, schemes, etc., as our investors started to evolve. And we could see that the investors have started to evolve because when I had come to this industry in 2007, the entire industry size was less than 10 lakh crores. Now, as we speak, the size is more than 40 lakh crores, and it will cross 100 lakh crores in less than a decade's time. So, as a result of that, we have seen this industry growing. And if I talk about retail investors, the product which is called SIP, 15,000 crores is where that number, that SIP has become. So, month on month, 15,000 crore comes to mutual funds without doing anything. As a result of that, जो हमारा dependence on foreign entities or FIs होता था, that dependence has also come down because our investors have become so aware. So then what we did was, then we decided as an industry that we should now add other important concepts also around finance. Most people now have good or decent understanding of what SIP is. Most people have basic understandings of mutual fund. So that is when this expansion began, and when we thought that when we stumbled upon will and succession planning, we realized with a stat that I would want to leave here, that 95% of Indians move on without making a will. 95% of Indians move on. So at that point in time, there was a realization that yes, maybe this also needs to be talked about, because there are a lot of myths. लोग, if somebody doesn't care या कोई किसी चीज़ की अगर care नहीं करता, उसे लगता है ये संभल जाएगा. The entire objective, and I'll be talking about will be कि शायद इतना आसानी से ये नहीं संभलेगा. And that will be the entire idea. But since it's an investor awareness session, what I'll do is I'll keep the first part of my talk limited to investments, and then in the second part I'll be touching upon will. What we have also given, other than discussing about will, we have also given a very basic format of will also. That also I'll take you through that format real-time basis, and we can talk through some of those things. But before that, I'll get into a little bit of the investor awareness content that I have. No worries, sir. I'll manage it. So I consider myself actually extremely lucky. So I was hearing from your chairman and the other prestigious members that the pin code of 40057 is a good pin code. A lot of investors reside here. I actually did not grow too far from this pin code. I grew up in 40056 in one part of Santa Cruz. But actually a lot has changed. I consider myself lucky because I was born in the decade of 1981. And I consider myself lucky because I come from that lucky generation that has seen both scarcity and abundance. So in the decade when I was born, if I take you down the memory lane, the decade when I was born, my first phone in my house was delivered 5 years after booking. मेरा exchange यहाँ पास में ही होता था. It was parallel exchange only. 5 years after booking. My dad had a scooter, blue color Bajaj super scooter. It was delivered 2.5 years after booking. I'm talking about the era of 80s. Also, during my childhood, from the day I was born, we were fortunate to have a black and white television at home. But that television was of little use, क्योंकि उस black and white television में पूरे दिन में सिर्फ 9 बजे आधे घंटे का प्रोग्राम आता था. बाकी जो चीज़ें आती थी वो उनसे मैं कभी कनेक्ट ही नहीं कर पाता था. तो कुछ प्रोग्राम्स जो मुझे याद है, नुक्कड़, बुनियाद और ये सब शाम को आते थे, राइट. नाउ इफ आई कॉन्ट्रास्ट दैट, जो मैं ये बातें 1980 के डिकेड की कर रहा हूँ, इफ आई कॉन्ट्रास्ट दैट विद टुडे, टेलीफोन कनेक्शन, you can walk across a mall shop next door, maybe 5 minutes, you'll have a new connection, you'll have complete data access. अगर मैं entertainment की बात करूँ, तो if you open your phone, pick up Facebook, Snapchat, etc., and you start scrolling the reels, वो खत्म ही नहीं होता. It's infinite. The entertainment quotient from half an hour at 9 o'clock is infinite. Similarly, if I talk about any other consumer goods that I have to talk about, all of those things are so easily available. Why am I setting this context? The idea is not just to make you feel nostalgic, but to appeal to you that a lot has changed just in last 35-40 years. Because I'm contrasting it from 1981, a lot has changed. In fact, the world looks completely different from 1981 to today. And as a result of that, two things. Our investment concepts have also become very, very dynamic. So back in that era, in the era of 90s, in the era of 80s, there were some other things also. So typically, if I remember, my parents had this target, that I want to remain fit till the age of 60 so that I can work and retire on my last day. That has completely changed today because two things. There is a positive to it and not so positive to it. The positive is people want to retire early. So people want to have good enough assets that they are able to retire or afford retirement early. The other aspect of that is कि at 51, 52, 53 मेरे skill sets relevant नहीं रह जाते हैं. In today's competitive world, what I offer as services, this also happens that at 51, 52, my skill sets may not be relevant. So from 60, we have moved to early retirement, voluntary, involuntary, both of them are there. Lifespans again, so 66, 67 is what by and large average life expectancy of India has been all these years. But now the life expectancy is rising and we are expecting in next 20 years, the life expectancy average will be 87 years. So that has changed. Apart from that, dependence on siblings. Of course, we have we have nuclear families now. There was a time when we used to have joint families. And apart from that, two last things have also changed a lot. So earlier there used to be very standard expense. Why? Because जब आपके पास products ही नहीं है. For example, like I give, if I want to buy a scooter, the next delivery is in 2.5 years. If I want to put up a telecom connection, it could take 1 to 5 years for it to be delivered. So even if I had money, there was very few things that the market offered. While today, the market has become extremely dynamic and has a lot of offerings. At the same time, it was very simple to manage money. Two, there were standard products that where if it was very easy to live off an FD also, simple as that, because 10, 11, 12% used to be FD returns. So अगर सिर्फ मेरे पास 10 लाख रुपए हैं, I put them aside in that era. With 1,20,000 of interest annually, 12% pay, 10,000 every month was easily manageable, isn't it? And apart from that, yes, जो government employees थे, I hope some of you must have been government employees also. Government employees who had joined their service before 2004 had pension, defined pension benefit till their retirement, something that my parents also enjoy. Defined pension, but none of those things exist today. So today's world has become very dynamic in terms of products. A lot is available, but at the same time, some of the benefits or some of the investment concepts that were used to be very simple are not so simple anymore. So this slide talks about कि wealth is something that wealth management can be outsourced, but health management has to be managed by individuals only. That you cannot outsource to anyone. You can hire a personal trainer, but he cannot do the workout for you. That you'll have to do it yourself. While your wealth can be managed by somebody else. Carbs cut down आपको ही करना पड़ेगा. If you enjoy smoking, वो cut down आपको ही करना पड़ेगा. If you enjoy drinking, वो cut down आपको ही करना पड़ेगा. वो कोई और sacrifice आपके लिए नहीं कर सकता. Move on next slide. Yeah. So here we are talking about one slide. जैसे the life was very simple. Live off an FD. एक FD कर दो, and this mindset even my parents had, that do one good FD and you are taken care, you can live off that interest. But in the dynamic world, that may not be possible, because this slide talks about various products that I'll discuss about, equity, debt, gold, etc., international funds. Things are so dynamic now that it will not be possible to live off one single asset class, and things have become a little dynamic, so hence we have to plan and understand some of these. Neha, next time. So here again we see, I don't know if the visibility is nice, we see a nice thali. The thali contains chapati and rice, which is carbohydrates. We have dal, which is proteins. Then the other stuff is basically vitamins. What we are trying to suggest here is, just like for your nourishment of your body, you need multiple things. A single thing will not work out. Similarly, in the current context and environment, there are multiple products that are required, and a single FD or single product, no longer services are requirement anymore. Yeah, next slide please. So here I have taken that example. If you remember, I was talking about कि 12% interest rate hota tha, which has been falling down. Now that interest rate sits around somewhere 590, 560. 12% pay to live off that interest was possible. At 590, 560, that too taxable. You cannot live off just an FD product. That we have very well understood, right? The rates have been falling. Or to extrapolate whatever is happening in India, ये समझा जाता है कि whatever happens in US, 10 years later it happens in India. So to extrapolate, if we look at the same thing in US also a similar trend can be seen, that right from 13% in the mid 80s, the interest rates almost went down to less than 1%. Before they rose again to 2.5%, 3%, but they were almost close to 1%. So that's the kind of fixed income return or an FD return US used to give. But usi samay, next button please. During that same time, the GDP was constantly rising. So one question here. Initially, I talked about that life was much simpler earlier. You could just do an FD and live off that FD. Now that option somehow doesn't seem to be available. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because against that, when one FD used to give 12%, so if anyone is starting a business, तो उसे अगर वो 100 रुपया, if he is borrowing 100 rupees, he had to generate more than 112 to be profitable, maybe 115 to be profitable. But with 5% interest rate, now even if he is generating 107 rupees, he is profitable. As a result of that, versus having just one MTNL option, 2 2.5 years waiting time of Bajaj Super Scooter, you have multiple options as a consumer. So as a consumer, the cost of capital going down actually benefits me a lot. This I'm saying because if somebody feels that the simpler era was a better era, in this era we benefit a lot as consumer, but as an investor we have to be a little more tactful and we have to accept a few more things. So this slide talks about GDP, how the GDP rises as the cost of capital. तो जब FD rates आपके नीचे आते हैं, economic activity, to decompose GDP is nothing but the income that we all of us generate together, a summation of that. The manufacturing or the productive value that the entire country creates, उसका summation है. So as FD rates or cost of capital falls in a country, उसी समय पे उस country की wealth or GDP rises very drastically. So as an investor, our options become limited in terms of FD, but at the same time we get so many more options as a consumer. Yeah, next slide please. I'll touch a little bit about Indian economy also because in fact I believe you are going to have a session on Wednesday where you will dive into this in much more depth. But the equity products or the SIPs that I will be talking about are actually interlinked with Indian economy. So I'll touch a little bit about the Indian economy also, as is why we feel that this decade, यानी अगले 8-10 साल are a decade that belongs to India. So let me, without giving you anything very technical, I will try to touch upon your own. So for example, people who were let's say in past 15-20 years, in your relatives, you would have at least 1, 2 or 3 people that are working in IT space, right? Working either in Bangalore, in US, typically working on software, data, artificial intelligence. Not so much you would have seen people working in manufacturing. So in Mumbai also, if I take you back the memory lane, a lot of corporate offices that are on the stretch of Tulsi Pipe Road, those all used to be mills. So we were into manufacturing. But in last 20 years, हमारे किसी भी relatives is, even if he is a production engineer, he is not working on production. He is not working in any factory or not running any factory. The reason for all of this is last 20 years, we became extremely service-oriented economy, which was good. It helped us raise the level of the standard of living, people getting a lot of money in dollars in IT services. Like the gentleman was taking example, a lot of children living in US working on the IT side. But what has happened to India since COVID is that all this manufacturing that had not just moved away from India, but from the whole world to China, is now started to change. Why? Because when COVID happened, most of the companies realized that China may not be very dependable. As a result of that, there is a term called China plus one policy. कि जिनकी भी factories China में थी, I'll take example of iPhone, the phone that I use. iPhone used to depend heavily on China. Majority manufacturing of iPhone, near 100% used to happen in China, right? And India was near single digits or zero, और latest iPhone तो इंडिया में बनते ही नहीं थे. When I say if the 12 was being launched, इंडिया में 10 की manufacturing हो रही थी. But as a result of this China plus one policy जो 2020 के बाद आई, the world has started to see new avenues कि चाइना के आगे भी हमें मैन्युफैक्चरिंग करनी है. In those destinations, India, Vietnam, there are multiple destinations, but India has also started to benefit. So as we speak, 7% of iPhones are now made in India. 7%. From zero only 2-3 years ago, 7%, and the latest 15 which has been launched now is also manufactured in India. So what we are seeing again is shift on towards the manufacturing sector in India. It started with phones. Then the government has now moved towards laptops. So what they have done is a carrot and a stick approach, which is if you are importing a lot of laptops, तो आपको license लेना पड़ेगा. But if you are making in India, you get additional benefit in terms of subsidies. So as a result of that, these some of the things that I've talked about, that we had become excessively service-oriented economy, but now because of manufacturing coming back to India, as it is, we have demographic dividend. The average age of an Indian is 28 years old versus 42 in China, much older in Europe, etc., etc. There are some other countries like Pakistan which are only 23, but they don't have the skill set, right? So India enjoys the demographic dividend at 28. It has always enjoyed in the last 10-15 years. But now with manufacturing moving to India, next 10 years is great in terms of Indian economy, is what we are looking at. So the reason why I'm talking about Indian economy is when typically we invest in SIPs and mutual funds. If India does well, my investments also do well. Yeah, next slide please. आगे ही ले लो, आगे ही ले लो. So yeah, so in context of those same things in terms of ranking, we are ranked today 5th in terms of GDP in the world. US and China will remain ahead of us even in next 5-10 years. But the next two, which is UK and Germany and Japan, is very likely that we'll move them aside and we'll become the third largest economy in terms of GDP in the world in another 5-6 years. Corporate earnings are growing, but I'll not get into very technicals of this. Okay, so again, why look at investments? Again, some of these things are pretty basic. That any money which is not working for you, any money which is just lying idle in the bank account, actually keeps losing value over a period of time. Some examples that are there on this slide is such as bread, petrol, some of the basic things. I can use example of education. Education, when I had done my MBA back in 2005-07, my MBA's cost was less than 2 lakh rupees, and I recovered my MBA's cost in 6 months. While the same cost is much, much higher now, and recovery also takes that much more longer. Education happens to be the second most expensive or the second highest inflation. Any guesses which is number one? Bang on. Medical. Education is second highest at 12%. Medical happens to be at 14%. Here we have taken a simple example where we have assumed a simple 6% rate of inflation. So yes, if money is not put to good work, then it sort of loses value for you. Yeah, next slide. So this slide talks about some basic things that at the age of 60, if my household expense, that is the basic grocery, electricity, broadband, etc., if that expense is 1 lakh rupees at 5% inflation, at the age of 85, that is 25 years later, it will be 3.2 lakh rupees. And this is talking about inflation. Next slide. And as I discussed medical inflation, so typically I'm taking average of India with now medical facilities have improved so much that a lot of illnesses that used to claim life are normally already managed. Every one of us, most of us do at least one medical checkup once in a year. As a result of that, at the first sign of uric acid, first sign of sugar, first sign of cholesterol, we become conscious. As a result of that, the other things that used to claim life have been tamed. Now, 3 things still dominate that spectrum. 1, cardiac related diseases, 2, cancer related diseases, and 3rd being organ failures. All 3, again, this slide talks about how the expenses around managing these diseases has been rising. Of course, we need to, it doesn't feel nice to think about these things, but something that has to be dealt with has to be looked upon at least once. Okay, so I find this slide very interesting. I don't know if you are able to see it clearly, but 10 paise, 20 paise, 5 paise, 10 paise coins is what we have. None of these guys are in use anymore. During my childhood, like I said, I was born in the 1981. During my childhood, some of these used to be relevant. In fact, my school fare used to be 75 paise, so 3 of those right-hand coins were enough for to take me to school. Another interesting incident, even when I was 10 years old, half ticket 12 साल के नीचे मिलता है ना. Even when I was 10 years old, मुझे conductor half ticket नहीं देता था. Because I was so tall कि he would never believe that I am 10 years old. He thought कि नहीं तुम ID card दिखाओ. You are lying. You are 14, 15 years old. I had to show him the ID card to get half ticket. But 75 paise is what used to be my bus fare to school. Now 75 paise will not get you anything in this city. Absolutely nothing. Although our bus fares are still cheap at 6-7 rupees because of government charity. But 75 paise will get you nothing. So again emphasizing the point that money that is not working well for you is actually losing value. Yeah. Next. Very interesting slide. This one, I don't know if all the other sessions that you have attended, other things probably you would have heard in some or the other form. This slide I typically spend a little more time because when I talk about investment concepts, I hear a lot of people say कि मैंने मीरा रोड में 1995 में घर लिया था, जितने का घर लिया था आज 1 साल में उतना रेंटल आ जाता है. या फिर कफ परेड में 1970 में लिया था, I make rents in 6 months what the price of that house was. You hear people often say these things in the sense a lot of people who have moved away from FD now कि अब FD तो 12% की है नहीं, next best thing क्या है, I will live off a real estate house. Nothing wrong with that, but the method that I said कि मीरा रोड में मैंने 1995 में लिया था, आज भी मुझे इतना रेंट आता है, is not the best way of comparison. Because if today you had money, you can't go back in 1995, right? So I'll give you this concept, which is an interesting and an important concept that we don't think about much. Is, for example, so let me take an example of Daisar, that 1 crore rupees is the cost of 1 BHK in Daisar. Let me assume that. If the cost is 1 crore rupees, and that today I have 1 crore rupees to buy that house, उस पे रेंट मिलता है 20,000 रुपये. आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट ग्रॉस रेंट, not accounting for maintenance, not accounting for taxes and brokerage and the other expenses. But if my gross rental is 20,000 rupees, multiply 20,000 rupees by 12, एक साल में महीने 12 होते हैं, what I get is 2,40,000 rupees. Now that 2,40,000 rupees compared to 1 crore rupees of price is 2.4%. This concept is called rent yield. अगर ये स्लाइड क्लियरली नहीं दिख रही है तो एक भारत का एक नक्शा है जो पूरे देश का रेंट यील्ड दिखा रहा है. एवरी डिस्ट्रिक्ट, एवरी टाउन, एवरी मेजर सिटी इट्स शोइंग द बेस्ट रेंट यील्ड इज प्रोबेबली 1 or 2 cities which are at 4%. Mumbai is at just close to 2.25%. Visakhapatnam is less than 2% also. So what I'm trying to suggest is, if I think real estate house is a good asset to live off, it's not really that the case. Yes, there is a different argument. आप बोलोगे कि वो appreciate होगा, but we are trying to understand कि can I live off that asset? Can that asset generate enough money that I can live out of it? सिर्फ उसके rental से मेरा घर चल जाए. So if you look at rent yields, because your emotional connect with the house is so high, कि वो asset सबसे poor perform करता है. Which means if I had 1 crore rupees, अगर वो मैंने saving bank account में छोड़ दिया होता तो I would have done better in terms of returns. Okay, so on this slide I'll compare a few more products, such as what I'll do is I spoke a little bit about real estate, I spoke a little bit about bonds and FDs, little bit about gold. The gold has also done well, and finally the Sensex, which is equity or mutual fund linked asset class. If I compare the returns in past 20-25 years, the best asset class seems to be the equity as an asset class, or SIP or mutual fund, whatever you might prefer to call it by that name. That asset class has done the best, followed by gold has done well, followed by 10-year bond yields, and of course the data for real estate is only available since 2013, and real estate hasn't done much since 2013. So as a result of that, what we understand on this slide कि equity बहुत अच्छा कर रहा है, followed by other things. But if you look at Indian investor, the preference is almost ulta. Maximum investors do real estate investment, followed by FDs, followed by gold, and then to an extent mutual fund, right? Equities happen to be the last asset class which only get 5% of household earnings, although they are one of the best performing asset class. Yeah. So I come to mutual fund. As I spoke about this, that equity is probably one of the best asset classes, but doing directly equity requires a lot of understanding, and as a result of that, mutual fund becomes a fantastic vehicle for investment. So what mutual funds basically do is do a lot of research, and out of the 8,000 companies available, they create portfolios of various kind of large cap, small cap, and thematic sectorial portfolios that the investors can use. And there are a lot of advantages as per taxation, advantage in terms of regulation, because mutual funds are very closely regulated by SEBI, and so the idea of SEBI behind mutual fund regulation is that somebody with 10 crore or somebody with 10,000 should get the same treatment. There will never be a beneficial treatment for a client even with 100 crores versus a client of just 10,000 rupees. ये कहीं और ना real estate में होगा ना सोनार की दुकान पे होगा. That will never be the case. A big ticket client will get preferential treatment. So here our regulator makes sure that that is also done. It's absolutely transparent as an asset class because the value of investment is declared every working day, and removing money is also absolutely easy. A typical debt fund comes 24 hours within redemptions, and typical equity funds come 48 hours after the redemption. So in that sense, mutual fund happens to be one of the best vehicles to manage equity. So as I establish, if I quickly summarize the part so far, we talked a little bit about why the FDs or plain vanilla things that used to help us live cannot do anything anymore because we are in a very dynamic environment. We understand that various asset classes are important, not just real estate or FD. Equities is a fantastic asset class, we have established that also. But in case of equities, the best method or best vehicle to buy equities is a mutual fund, and that is what also I have established. In case of mutual fund also, there are 3 tools available. आप लोगों में से कई, all of you would have experienced SIP. There are 2 more tools that are available. In fact, the last session I had done on will and succession and wealth planning, there also somebody had asked me ki mutual fund, we have heard about SIPs, but what about my retirement and pension, etc., etc. So I'll just touch upon this slide. So first, SIP, everyone knows about. SIP is nothing but what happens in case of SIP is on a pre-decided date that you have chosen, a pre-decided amount that you have chosen gets debited from your chosen bank account and goes to a mutual fund scheme. That is what SIP is. It goes till you want it to go. It stops when you want it to stop. The maximum period that you can choose is 30 years only. And it's completely up to you. It's not like an EMI ki 240 ही चाहिए या 10 ही चाहिए या 12 ही चाहिए. It can be anything. You can start today and stop tomorrow. So SIP is that facility that moves money from your bank account to your schemes of preferred investment. The second tool is STP, where from your one mutual fund scheme, it moves to another mutual fund scheme. So if you have chosen a simple or a safe mutual fund such as liquid funds, from there the money moves to an equity fund. There again it is your choice how much money you want to move every week, every month, daily, whatever. That is the second tool. And coming finally to the third tool, which is SWP, where once you have created a corpus, you can just set up this withdrawal, and on your chosen date, a prefixed amount that you have chosen will come back to your bank account. As a result of that, an investor has 3 phases in life. There is an accumulation phase, a maturity phase, and a deaccumulation phase. In accumulation phase, typically from the age of 25 to 45, you are gathering assets. In the maturity phase, what happens is your assets produce more money than your income. And finally, after the phase of passive and retirement, your assets start to generate income for you. So SIP can be done in your first and second phase, and SWP, post-retirement, you can live off those assets using SWP, and there are many advantages to that, including a fantastic tax advantage. So let's move on to the next slide and touch upon that. Stop here only. So quickly, if I offer to play a game with you, कि मैं 1 करोड़ रुपए आज आपको ऑफर करूं, ठीक है, और मैं रिटर्न में आपसे सिर्फ ये बोलूं कि 1 रुपए आप मुझे रोज दे दीजिए 30 दिनों तक या 31 दिनों तक, 31 days, 1 रुपए, बट नॉट सिंपली 1 rupee, डबल इट एवरी डे. So day 1 1 rupee, day 2 2 rupee, day 3 4 rupee, day 4 8 rupees. Will you take that deal, that accept 1 crore rupees today and return me 1 rupee doubling every day till 31 days? Yes, no? No, most people are saying no. Okay, why no? नहीं, मैं 30 दिन की बात कर रहा हूँ. हाँ, I can get from you. हाँ, so which means I'll give you 1 crore, I'll take 19 crores from you. Correct? That's the point you're making. And anyone else? So the gentleman here has said कि this deal is a bad one, क्योंकि मैं सिर्फ आपको 1 करोड़ दूंगा और आपसे 19 करोड़ मुझे वापस मिल जाएगा. ठीक है, अच्छा मैं सिर्फ 20 दिन की बात करता हूँ, 31 days नहीं. फिर you will take that deal? You will still not take this. Why not? Still it is more than. So your gentleman here is right, but not exactly right. In 31 days, it will become 100 crores. So on day 10 सिर्फ 512 होंगे, on day 15 638 होगा, on day 20 5,20,000 होगा, on day 25 भी 1 करोड़ 70 लाख ही होगा, but on day 31 it will be 107 crores. The reason why we talk about this game or this slide is often we think linearly. So most people in this room are well informed enough to understand कि the question I was asking was a trick question, because you will have to give me more. But even people who had good understanding did not appreciate the fact enough what will be the magnitude of it, right? The reason for that is we think linearly. We do not think exponentially. And what happens in this example is the money which only starts with 1 rupees, which is doubling, which is only 5 lakh rupees on day 20, और मैंने तो 1 करोड़ दिया था तो उसमें सिर्फ 5% है, but on day 31 the doubling reaches such a big number. The reason why we show this example is because we don't think linearly. The compounding of SIPs actually work on these lines. The numbers of SIP, simple amount as 5,000, 10,000, they start low. But as the years go by, that compounding can make that number tremendously high. And we'll show a few examples of how high that can go. Yeah, so here is one more slide that's talking about if I had 10,000 rupees and I assume a growth rate of 8%, 10% and 12% over next 25 years, how much will that 10,000 per month grow to? Right, and the amount that I'm looking at, the amount that I'm looking at is amount that at 12%, 1 crore 89 lakhs is what I'm looking at if I start with just 10,000 rupees. But let's go to the next slide. But here also there is one concept of step up. So if I today plan my retirement, and if, let's assume my retirement is going to happen in 16 years time. If I plan my retirement, if I do the math, ये लगता है कि मुझे retirement के लिए 8-9 करोड़ रुपए चाहिए. तो with today's mathematics, I feel कि मैं even if I put 30,000, 25,000, 40,000 SIP, it may not be enough, right? Because the number is such a steep one. What I don't realize is with time and inflation, my income goes up. Similarly, if I start inflating my SIP with the level of my income, then I come across a concept called step-up SIP. And with that step-up SIP, it makes a huge difference to a normal calculation. So if I was to do a normal SIP of 10,000 rupees in a fund where the returns is 12.5%, I will invest 30 lakh rupees over next period of 20-25 years. But as a result of that, the value of that 30 lakh will grow to 2 crores. But if I do a step up, which means every year as my income goes up, if I increase the SIP amount also by 10%, that same value reaches 4.5 crores, which I started just with an amount of 10,000 rupees. It's not that I'm starting with a big number. So like I had used that example of compounding, we actually do not think exponentially. A small amount also, if you keep doing step up and with compounding over a period of time, can actually give you exponential returns. Yeah, so I have already discussed this, that SIP is for wealth creation, SWP is for regular income, insurance protects your savings and emergency funds. You can go to the next slide, which is, I guess, about insurance. Yeah. So insurance, yes, insurance is something that is required. However, I don't very well agree with the kind of insurance products that are made available to investors. The insurance that is really required for an investor is not really pitched by anyone. Nobody chases you for that investment, nobody follows up, nobody calls you for that for that insurance. And yes, I can say it's a difficult concept also, because I have not been able to convince my own mother about the insurance policy that I have. So the requirement of insurance is just to cover an unfortunate event. And to cover that unfortunate event, you have term policies, right? The minute you start using insurance as an investment product, you're basically giving your cook the job of your driver, which can only cause inefficiencies, sometimes disaster, right? The job of an insurance provider is to cover the risk if the unfortunate event happens. And as a result of that, term policy happens to be the most efficient insurance that is there. It doesn't give you anything if you surpass. So for example, if I take a term policy for the age of 70, and I keep paying premium till the age of 70, and let's say it's a 1 crore policy or 2 crore policy, a lot of times people find it hard to understand कि 2 करोड़ की पॉलिसी है, मैंने 70 साल तक भरा, मुझे कुछ नहीं मिलेगा वापस. One, that premium is very, very low. Two, if I live till 70, I will make more than those 2 crore rupees. The reason of this policy exists if I don't live till 70. So that, and believe me, it is not an easy concept, because I have not been able to convince my own mother, because my mother says, what kind of insurance have you taken that nothing will come back? Nothing is supposed to come back if I am around. It is supposed to come back only if I am not around. So one, in insurance, the most important insurance is term policy. Nobody pitches that. वो कोई pitch करता ही नहीं, क्योंकि आपको 1 करोड़ का भी cover hardly for 10-15 in the right age, 10-15-20,000 में मिल जाता है. Similarly, if you have other If you have a home, maybe insuring that is important. If you have other assets, health insurance is absolutely important. But these insurances are not so aggressively sold. The insurance that are aggressively sold are term plan, ULIP plans. Nowadays, term plans are sold very aggressively. I'll just leave this one thought with you. If somebody pitches insurance to you, you just have to ask him one number. Just say, oh, I had shown you the rental yield number, right? Behind all the facade of real estate, that fantastic property, amenities, lifestyle, this, that, the rent yield is 2.5%. The number behind it is 2.5%. Similarly, if somebody is trying to pitch insurance to you with a traditional plan, this plan, all you need to ask them is what is the XIRR? First of all, the minute you ask this question, the person will immediately realize that he knows what he's talking about. And he'll come back to you with a number of 6%, 5.5%, which means in a long term of 16, 17 years, all that policy will give you is 5 or 6%. So all that you need to do is ask the XIRR. If a term plan is being, if an insurance policy is being pitched to you, कि ये पैसा वापस आएगा. But the insurance that you really need is a term plan or a health insurance or a property insurance. Yeah. A little bit about markets, but we can skip this part, just that I'll touch upon markets. Equity markets, like FD gives you a fixed return of 6%, it gives consistently. Equity market doesn't give it consistently. It can potentially give you returns of GDP plus inflation, which is 12, 13, 14%, but it doesn't come in a straight line. It's a bumpy ride. Some years you will have 20%, like this year, 20, 25% returns. Some years the returns are very low. But as you spend more time of 8 years, 10 years, 3 years, 5 years, the returns start to average out, and then you see a GDP plus inflation number which is close to 13, 14% returns emerging from equity markets. Yep. Let's skip the equity part. So yeah, this final slide, Warren Buffett, how many of you have heard this name? All of us. So we discuss this very often. So okay, then what is Warren Buffett famous for? Creating wealth. So Warren Buffett, he's not like a Bill Gates who has created Microsoft that has impacted everybody's life. He's not like a Jeff Bezos who has created an Amazon who has impacted everybody's life. He's not like an Elon Musk who has created Tesla and changed the world, right? This guy is just an investor. Why he is famous? Because he had compounded his assets at 21% CAGR for 40 years. That was a record in itself. 40 साल तक 21% CAGR. And the reason why we have put him on this slide is his majority, that is 99% of his wealth came after the age of 50. 99% of his wealth came after the age of 50. That's how compounding works, right? We were discussing that slide कि 20वें दिन पे भी 5 लाख ही था. But वो 31वें दिन पे 100 करोड़ हो गया. So the way MS or a compounding asset works in the long run can actually not be thought of as linearly. Everyone in this room understood that it was a trick game, but only one gentleman gave me the answer that it will be 100 crores. The rest thought it would be in vicinity of between 3 and 10 crores, right? So with that, just one more concept I'll touch upon, which is cost of delay calculator. What happens in this case, like as I said that as the time grows, the returns can start rising exponentially. If somebody starts investment journey at 5,000 rupees at the age of 25, the accumulated wealth at 55 at 12% is close to 1 crore 76 lakhs. But if somebody starts late, let's say the other lady, so Renu here started at the age of 25, and the other lady, Megha, she started her journey at 45 with thrice the capital. इन्होंने सिर्फ 5,000 की SIP की थी, मेघा ने की 15,000 की SIP, which is thrice the amount. But she started 20 years late. Even with thrice the amount, she ends up only with 35 lakh at 12%. आप समझ रहे हो? Even a small amount started immediately and early can grow exponentially. Like I said, because we have a linear brain, we do not think exponential. But the investment concept, and I can also talk about the highest IQ guy, which is Einstein. He had once said that I don't know which are the 7 wonders of the world, but the 8th wonder is compounding. Because a small number can become so exponentially big that it's difficult to even understand. Yeah. So I think we can move on from here. So some other concepts also here, that if you have SIPs have started, even if markets, for example, today I heard some people discussing that the market's corrected and all that. A lot of times we get corrections where people are scared and then they cancel SIPs and move away from mutual funds. But if I look at these charts, what we realize is that every time a bump comes, there is a spring reaction and there is a bounce back. So if you keep cancelling your SIPs, your returns happens to be much lower. But if you stick to the investment and let the compounding play, because in the end of the day, you are betting on India. If you believe that Indian population will grow, if more facilities are to come, we are sitting in Parla, the electricity here is 24 hours. The minute we go 50 kilometers more on the north side, things start to change. At 100 kilometers, they change even more in terms of facilities. If we believe that the growth continues, then India's GDP will continue. If GDP continues, the equity markets will keep giving good returns, because we are betting on India. We are not betting on anything, and we are not betting on a mutual fund. We are not betting on a Franklin Templeton. You are not betting on a specific mutual fund. What you are betting on is the GDP of India. And India is, like I said, we are in a sweet spot for next 10 years. We have captured the service spectrum, but we will be capturing the manufacturing spectrum as we speak. So with that, I think I will complete the slides on investment planning. There is a little bit stuff on taxation also, but do I touch upon taxation? So what we had discussed right in the beginning, that is will and succession planning, we'll straight away with this get into it. Yeah, no problem. So if I have lost your attention and you have gone down memory lane or probably on a WhatsApp notification, this would be a good time to come back. Because now I will start talking about will and succession planning. This I will do in 2 or 3 parts. The final part that I'll do is actual, we have given you a sample of an actual will, and we will touch upon that. So as I had taken the example right in the beginning, 95% of Indians die intestate, which means without writing a will. Just give me a second, please. So I will not embarrass anyone here. I will not ask anyone in this room that whether you have written a will or not written a will. But I will assume that the percentage that applies to India, maybe people in Parla are much smarter, किसी ने बोला था PIN code वाला, but that 95% probably will drop to 85 or 75%. But I will still have to assume that 75% people will still not write a will for various reasons, that people think that it's okay if I don't write a will. But then I will ask this question to that some people don't write a will thinking that if they have done nomination, it will take care of it. So first question, is will important or nomination important? Both. So I'll tell you a story, a real experience that I had. Around 8 years ago, I got call from one of the banks. A lady walked into the branch, and she showed statements of her husband who was no more. And bankers, not knowing what to do in this case, they gave me a call. They gave that, since this was investment of Franklin Templeton, उन्होंने just उठा के मेरा number दे दिया, because they didn't know what to do with this, right? What to do with this? The investment was not even done through the bank. It was done in 2004, while I was getting this call in 2015. So when this lady called me, and I took all the details from her, understood that there was a decent value of 7.5-8 lakh rupees, 7.5-8 lakh rupees, and this I'm talking about 8-9 years ago. So it was a decent value. But the first thing when I went to my back-end team with my operations, the first thing that I noticed was there was no nomination. And then when there was no nomination, I started to understand the process. And when I understood the process and I got back to this lady, unfortunately I had to tell her a process that an additional document was required. To access her own 8 lakh rupees, an additional document was required, and the cost of that document was 55,000 rupees. So with only one thing, that is nomination, that could have been avoided. So point number one, the gentleman there said that nomination is important. So I'll start with this. Nomination is absolutely important in all your products, in all your financial products. So the first actionable that we should have today is go back home and check each and every bank account, each and every demat, each and every mutual fund, whether nominations are there in place or not there. Because if in territory of Mumbai, if there is no nomination, that document that I was talking about is a probate. So if you do not have a nomination, you have to depend on a will. If you have to depend on a will, the will in Mumbai, in Chennai and in Kolkata has to be probated, and the cost of that probation is 7% to get a probated will. So in this case, the minute you have a nominee, at least the first step is taken care of. Okay, now we come to the next step. So now we have established nominee is absolutely required in all your products. And by the way, I'll add this little more. Our mutual fund industry has evolved in last 30 years. बिना nomination के भी चल जाता था. Now SEBI is slowly making it very tight there. What will happen by end of October, that any new SIPs, any new purchases, any new STPs, even in your existing folio, if there is no nomination, will not go through. But your old investments and your old running SIPs will continue. So even there, although the regulator is making it absolutely mandatory, it's still our responsibility to go back and check if nomination is there, because your old SIPs will run even without a nomination, and anything, that's our tendency as Indians, anything that is not compulsory, koi karta hi nahi hai wo. Correct. So first and foremost, nomination. However, once the nomination has been done, is nominee a beneficial owner? For example, if I make my wife my nominee, does that mean that for my mutual funds, my wife gets absolute right on it after I pass away? No. So nominee in the eyes of law is a custodian owner. So he is a representative. He only gets to represent you as a person. So only there are two products where a nominee is, a blood related nominee is a beneficial nominee, and those two products are, one, life insurance, two is public provident fund account. In these two, a nominee is as good as beneficial owner. In all other products, a nominee is just a custodian, a representative. So yes, if I make my wife a nominee, it would mean that she has the right to my assets after me as a custodian. But can she be challenged in the court of law? Yes. Will she have absolute right on it? No. So one, nominee, like gentleman there said, nominee is a must. We have to go back and check. But even after making sure that nominee is there, a will is absolutely necessary. And that is where in this session we are going to talk about will. Will is actually subset of succession planning, which involves multiple things, but will happens to be the most important of them all. And yeah. So we two things. Now, if a will is not made, for example, if one does not make a will, then what happens is, I'll again take you back to my original story. I started with the context of 1981 being contrasted with today, right? So 40 saal hue na 1981 from the time I was born, but it looks poles apart, right? बहुत अलग लगता है, isn't it? The world today versus 1981, it looks a very different world. If you don't make a will, the laws that apply to your succession were written in 1957 and 1925. As I talk about, if a will is not made, what happens, you will realize that I don't identify with this. I just don't identify with this. So if a person passes away without making a will, then the dictation happens by Indian Succession Act or Hindu Succession Act or Muslim Sharia Act Succession Act. In case of a Hindu, now I'll talk about Hindu Succession Act first. If you're a Hindu male has three kinds of first class legal heirs, right? A Hindu male's first class legal heir includes mother, includes spouse, and includes children. Which means if I have a mother, if I'm lucky enough to have a mother, if I have spouse and I have three children, they all have equal right, 1/5, 20%, equal rights. Whereas if I imagine my world today, I will not necessarily plan it that way. Right? If I imagine my world today, I would want to leave those assets with my spouse and even not give control to my children today. And why do we write will? We write will to secure ourselves. It's not to secure anybody else. Because till the day I am alive, my assets have to be in my control. Writing will is not about securing anybody else. Because somebody who can take care of others only if you are strong yourself. If I am weak, I cannot take care of others, and will makes me strong. So coming back to our concept and our discussion, if I am a Hindu male, my first class legal heir happens to be my mother, my spouse and all my children, equal rights. Equal rights. So whatever are your assets, if you have 2 children, everyone gets 25%. Now I'll talk about a Hindu female. If a Hindu female passes away, her first class legal heirs are spouse and children. The only difference here is mother is not there. The spouse and children all have equal rights. So as a result of that, if a female passes away and the spouse is still surviving, the spouse gets equal rights as much as children. If your property is running into 30 lakh rupees and you have a spouse and 2 children, 10 lakh rupees will be entitlement of all of them. Right? Now, if I had to imagine my journey, I am actually not in sync with this succession law, because like I said, when these laws were written in 1957, in 1925, we used to live in joint families. And hence, the family support system used to kick in. Hence, the Succession Act actually gives weightage to everyone in the family. So your mother also gets benefit through your mother. As your mother passes away, your brothers and sisters will also become legal heir of your mother. And as a result of that, in your property, your brothers and sisters will also become legal owners. However, the values of today's nuclear family dictate that if I have moderate amount of assets, if I have fantastic assets, it doesn't matter. If I have moderate amount of assets, typically people in voting today choose that I would want to secure my partner first, not even children. My partner first, and I will leave it to my partner to decide what to do in the course of time. Like I said, I repeat, will is about securing myself, making me strong, because if I am strong, only then I can help others. So with that, what I'll do is I'll touch upon a few aspects, critical aspects of will, and then we will go through an actual will. We have shared a format with you because, like I said, it's absolutely important to make a will. First of all, I'll put this disclaimer also that the format that we have given you is a very basic format. You should sit down with a practicing lawyer. I am an LLB, but I'm not a practicing lawyer. You should sit down with a practicing lawyer and decide each and every aspect of this so that you can completely immunize and make a very strong will. But what we have given you is a sample will, so you can at least start with that. A gentleman was asking me a question that how many wills can we make? You can make n number of wills. The last will that you make, the last will is what becomes applicable. So with that, I'll just touch a few aspects and I'll get into the sample will. So a will has various aspects. First of all, a will has an executor that you have to name, and when I touch upon sample will, we will discuss about an executor also. The executor can be beneficiary also. So if I'm making a will, my wife is a beneficiary, she can be executor also. The other aspect is it compulsory to register a will? Yes, no? Not. So a will, although one advises to register it, it is not compulsory. A will, this very sample that we have given you, if you go home and make a will on that with all the rules and leave it with your beneficiaries, that also serves the purpose, but it is recommended that you register the will. Why? Because that way, even if the possession of that will is lost or it's damaged, the government representative office or sub-registrar will always have a copy of that, which he will produce in front of the court of law. So although not mandatory, but advisable to register, and it doesn't cost too much to register a will. Right? Can there be a joint will? So I'll touch upon this one. Yes, joint will is possible. Making a joint will is possible, but there is a complication there, which is if I make a joint will along with my wife today, if I pass away, that will cannot be changed. that she will have to live with the will as the circumstances were today. And as we very well understand, circumstances changed. So ideally, joint will can be made, but it's not advisable to make a joint will. Ideally, we advise to make individual wills, even if wife doesn't have any property or income today. A joint will, instead of a joint will, it's advisable to have two separate wills from both of one. Is stamp duty or stamp paper required for will? So will can be written on a plain paper. Stamp paper वहाँ यूज़ हम करते हैं जहाँ पे जिस भी ट्रांजैक्शन में stamp duty payable होती है. In case of will, stamp duty is not payable. So as a result of that, stamp paper is not required. You can make it on a normal paper. Yes, in like I had discussed, Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata, a will has to be probated not by you but after you. आफ्टर whoever has made the will, उस will को एग्जीक्यूट करने के लिए प्रोबेट लेना पड़ता है, लेकिन other places is not compulsory, but probate is close to 7%, 7.5% in Mumbai. In Chennai it's even higher, but all of that is at a cap of 75,000 rupees. So Mumbai ka cap 75,000 rupees hai, Chennai is 50,000, Kolkata is 25,000. So even if your property runs into crores, it will never cross, the getting probate will not cost more than 75,000 rupees. Also probate takes time to come. So you have to plan for 6 months at least to get the probate. What is the probate? Of course, last time when I had done this session, मैं 15 मिनट तक probate की बात कर रहा था. Then a youngster asked me कि sir probate क्या होता है? And then I realized that people like me take it for granted. A probate is nothing but जो will है. अगर मैंने will बनाई है, मेरा beneficiary मेरे बाद वो will लेके जाता है कोर्ट में, कोर्ट studies that will and reaches out to the financial institutions like mutual fund and all that to verify whether these folios, these assets are actually there, and then they issue a probate. So basically probate is nothing but a court's guarantee that this will is correct and this beneficiary is entitled to get benefit from this probate. So that is what in short a probate is, which is given by the court. Like I said again, Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata, probate is compulsory. The cost is capped at 75,000, 50,000 and 25,000. But for smaller assets, the probate, like I had given that case of that lady for 8-9 lakhs, that 7.5% is very painful. It is a very big number. But if you talk about a real estate property or anything else, then that becomes a very small amount. And it is important to get it probated. For example, if I inherit a real estate property using a will, if I inherit a real estate property, when I sell it tomorrow, the buyer will be very confident and comfortable कि ये probated will है. He has a probated will, so there will not be any claim coming on this property later. If there is no probate available, then the buyer will always try and discount that property कि you don't have a perfect title or a perfect document to that, right? Yes. Without probate, 4 lakh rupees normally. So in case of mutual funds, see basically, so mutual fund categorizes transmission by category of high risk and low risk. So if your investment is just 50,000, 60,000, 1 lakh rupees and there is no nominee, and if somebody shows a will, then that will get transferred without a probate for an amount lesser than 4 lakh rupees. But like the way compounding works, अगर आपने किसी भी डिसेंट फंड में 10,000 रुपए या 20,000 रुपए भी 15 साल पहले डाले होते, तो दे इजीली क्रॉस दैट 4 लाख का लिमिट. सो वेरी रेयरली डू वी कम. So as Franklin Templeton, if somebody comes to me and says कि ट्रांसफर करना, I would not know उस इन्वेस्टर के बाकी बाहर कितने हैं. जो the threshold is 4 lakh rupees on the mutual fund only. So if there are 5 funds that you have with me totaling to 4 lakh rupees that you are transmitting, you are doing a transmission, then I may club that. I will club that. But other mutual funds it doesn't matter. तो 3 लाख करके आपके 10 जगह हैं तो 30 लाख रुपए भी without probate चल जाएगा. Probate, the painful part of probate is 6 months of waiting time, and वैसे होता नहीं है, but if it gets challenged, then it can get extended to 2 years also. So the clerical work and the waiting time is what makes probate irritating. But in case of real estate, it's advisable because you're talking about a big asset and you're talking about a strong title. तो probate चाहिए ही नहीं ना, because I will not ask for the will. So I'll tell you, nomination helps me as mutual fund more than you as investor. क्यों? क्योंकि as financial institution, नॉमिनी का नाम आपका नाम दिया था, मैंने आपको दे दिया, my legal responsibility is over. But you are just custodian, right? For you to become entitled, you need to have the will. But I will give you that money without a probated will because you are the nominee. The case that I was talking about where that lady called me, there was no nomination, and hence now SEBI is making it compulsory. I repeat that after 30th of October, new investments, new STPs, new switches will not happen only unless a nominee is there. You either have to give a nominee or you have to very clearly say, I have no nominee. So by the way, if you have no nominee, then the succession will take its due course, and succession certificate as per the succession laws that we discussed will come through. If there is nominee, no. So as a financial institution, I am more than happy to give your nominee 20 crores also. Because I am safe. You had nominated, legally whether that person can enjoy or no, that is his lookout. I am safe. So I'll use let me put this in a real example. So that's what I said right in the beginning. No, the nominee protects me more than you. So in Demat account also it can be challenged. Very much challenged. There was one confusion caused by Bombay High Court single bench. I'll touch upon that also. There was a single bench of Bombay High Court which had given a judgment that because Demat falls under company law, hence usme nahi hoga, but then that was overruled by Supreme Court. So in case of Demat also, but anyways, I'll give a live example because I guess this part has to be understood by everyone. Let me use a few scenarios. I nominate my wife and I have 10 lakhs of investment in case of mutual fund. I nominate my wife and I pass on. In this case, my wife gets the custody of that 10 lakh rupees, but she can immediately be challenged by whom? My mother and my children to give equal share of that. Because if she doesn't have a will, the succession law gives my mother as well as my children equal right for litigation. Second scenario, I have not nominated only, and 10 lakh rupees I have. In second scenario, she will have to get a succession act where naturally in that 10 lakh rupees, she will only have a right on 2.5 lakh rupees because I have 2 children and a mother, right? This is the second scenario. Third scenario, I have made nomination as well as will. The minute I had do nomination, this 10 lakh straight away goes to my wife. Now, she is in control of this 10 lakh rupees. This solves problems for middle class and upper middle class unless you have troubled relationships with people. Normally, upper middle class with nomination, they do not go beyond. But to make it absolutely safe, if I have nominated her, she gets that 10 lakh rupees plus I also make a will that my mutual fund assets will go completely to my wife. My real estate asset, my mother needs a shelter, so she will have every right to continue. But my mutual fund assets and my mother, like I said, she gets pension. So like I'm saying that every individual's context is complicated. So don't leave yourself to the mercy or your survivors at the mercy of Indian Succession Act. That's the point I was trying to derive. So I have discussed these 3 scenarios, and so I'll move on. Stamp duty I have discussed. So will also needs to have witness. We'll see that witness part also. The witness cannot be beneficiary. तो अगर आज आप घर जाके will बना दोगे तो ये possible नहीं है घर में जाके अगर if you have a wife and a children घर में ही बना लेते हैं सब हो जाएगा, because the witness cannot be at home क्योंकि जो witness है वो beneficiary नहीं होगा. A witness will not benefit, and the other thing is you will write down the entire will, make all the details, but you have to sign in front of that witness. So you can fill up the entire will, but the signature part, if you have 2 witnesses who are not coming to you together, then you have to sign twice in front of 2 different witnesses. If you are going to register it at the sub-registrar's office, then you have to invite those witnesses to the sub-registrar office as well. Also about witness, there is one more discussion, that is, in case of witness, people generally take signature of a doctor. thinking कि ये signature of a doctor will be enough. In most cases it is enough, but in India, whenever you see court cases and when you read about with Google, anyone can read. You don't have to be a lawyer or LLB. Anyone can go to Indian Kanun and N number or Chat GPT, read N number of cases. Maximum cases are challenged in India on two grounds. One, at the time of making the will, the person was of unsound mind. The second claim comes that the signature is forged. These two things maximum happen. If you think that challenge will be there, the safest method is not just making doctor a witness. That is not good enough. Just an MBBS doctor being my witness of the will doesn't completely make it foolproof. Ideally, a date before my will, I should get and if you think to this extent your will gets challenged, then a date before my will writing and signing, I should get a psychiatrist certificate that I am in testamentary capacity, and after writing that will, I should get one more certificate from a psychiatrist. This will make this will foolproof. One more question. Can will be handwritten? The answer is yes, but if your writing is like mine, then not. Because it has to be very, if you're writing it, so there are pros and cons to this also. If you're writing it very clean, okay, handwritten is allowed. The law doesn't forbid handwritten. Also, there is also an advantage, which is, if you have written the entire will with your own hands, even if somebody was dictating, no, it will be very hard for anyone to prove that you were of unsound mind. Because if you can articulate a will and write it down, it's not possible that you were of unsound mind, or the signature from that point of view cannot be forged because you have written the whole document. But having said that, handwritten wills, if your writing is absolutely clean, handwritten wills are also valid. So even if you take this format home that we are given and you write it down, from a law perspective, that would be good enough to begin with. So yes, handwritten wills, if your writing is clean, is accepted. It also has benefits that no one can prove you of. It will be hard to prove you of unsound mind when you are writing this will. Okay, the witness has to be younger than you, fitter than you. So an uncle of mine who likes to smoke and drink will not be an ideal witness. You should see a witness who's fitter than me and who's younger than me, right? He'll outlive me, huh? Should succeed me at least by 10-15 years. When you write the will, ID numbers. Write a new will. Write a new will. So basically, will can also have a codicil. For example, if you have made a complete will and you just want to change one paragraph, you can add, this document is called codicil. You can change one paragraph, but again you have to take two witnesses. So the same process has to be repeated. If the witness passes away, you can make this also, I was talking with a gentleman before the session that the world is not perfect. What happens is, why people don't write will is people are not able to make some of these big decisions. Executor kaun hoga, beneficiary kaun hoga, who I will keep out. Especially for somebody like me who has minor children. For me, even making a decision is very difficult. If me and my wife don't survive, who do we give custody of those? So these are very difficult questions to answer. These are not easy questions. But the reason why people don't write wills, because हम में एक tendency होती है ना, which is called procrastinate. Anything that is hard, we want to postpone it. But what one needs to understand is, there is no perfect world, there are no perfect relationships, so you will never have a perfect document. So whatever is best as per today's circumstance, you should make it, and you are allowed to make n number of wills. The latest one will eventually be applicable. Yeah. So I'll move on to next part. You can also, when it comes to will, you can also, will is not just for past assets, but also future assets. I can even in my will mention that today, if I am writing my will in September of 23, even the assets that I make after that, till the date I am no more, all those assets also go to ABC. Even for undivided assets, even where I don't know what those assets are, there also my share I can hand it over to somebody. If it's divided, so as it is, I have the entitlement to pass it on. Now with that, I have actually come to the end. I'll quickly read through this will. That is a sample copy that we have given you, and with that we can break for dinner and we can take the Q&A. हाँ? सब cover कर लिए, देख लो अब. Everything है. This is very basic.
Something on Demat accounts.
So, yeah, please. If your portion you know clearly, you can mention. Even if you don't know clearly, like I said, undivided ancestral asset, I can call it out in the will. Yeah. So yes, so I have we have provided you a format of basic will. In case of Demat account also, like I said, there are only two nominations which are regarded as beneficiary nominations. Those are life insurance policy, where the nominee is a blood relative, he is a beneficial or he or she is a beneficial nominee. Second is PPF. Apart from that, any other nominee in the eyes of law is not a beneficiary nominee. It will have to be called out in a will. Yeah. So I'll quickly touch upon that, which is there are 10 points that we have. Do you want us to go through this quickly? Yep. So the first point, we begin with my details, in the sense you write your name, your father's name, your address, age, your occupation. Point number 1 talks about that this will is being made, and the codicil part that I had mentioned, that it has no other codicil, and this is my last will. Right. Apart from that, I appoint here. I write about the executor. The executor can be beneficiary if I think my wife is capable enough to handle law and order. I can do that. Otherwise, I can make another person executor. If I don't make executor, then the court appoints, which is not the best position to be in. A beneficiary can be an executor. A witness cannot be beneficiary. I clarify this. Executor is the one whose responsibility it is to make sure that the will is executed. A witness cannot benefit. So an executor can be beneficiary. My wife can be an executor as well as beneficiary. Yeah. So first I write about the executors. Next, then I call out my family members. This also happens in court cases in India, that people say कि he forgot about me at the time of writing the will because he was unsound mind, and that is why he didn't give me property. So that is why there is a section added in will कि ये मेरे family में ये लोग हैं, I remember, but I am not giving them. Right. So the section number 3 is where I write who is there in my family, everyone who I think is part of my family. Section. So see, there are. So if that's what I'm saying. In, like I said, no matter how much I would have scared you, but even if I have scared you, normally I have seen in middle class, upper middle class, where the stakes are not too high, in case of mutual fund financial assets, a nominee becomes good enough. But the minute the stakes are high, the people will pursue, na? People will pursue then in that case. So point number 3 is that. Point number 4 is my property consists of. Here we have given a very small section, but it has to, in my mind, you have to name every folio, every scheme, and the units held on a given date, right? It has to be absolutely clear, not left to anyone's assumption. If you have whatever details you have, PPF account, etc., you have to give details of everything. If you have real estate asset also, there also you have to give index to every detail that you can trace out, right? So that could be one part of it, but then somebody else will have to take the trouble and they will not be praising you. बाद में जिसको trouble लेना पड़ेगा ना, वो और गुस्से में रहेगा. And in the afterlife, कम से कम afterlife तो peaceful होनी चाहिए. Yeah. Then apart from that, of course, point 5 is where I talk about the beneficiaries. Point 6, etc. are standard procedure. Point 7 talks about if the beneficiary predeceases me, then how do you do the treatment. Point 7, then you write about your children, etc. Details of your children. Point 8 also talks about the expenses around the will. Point 9 talks about the executor should go ahead and obtain the probate. उसका खर्चा कहाँ से आएगा, that it talks about. And then point 10, you finally come to that I have made this will. It's a free will in sound health and mind, and you write the date, etc., etc. You don't sign it because you have to sign it in front of the witness who cannot be a beneficiary. I repeat, a witness cannot be a beneficiary, an executor can be a beneficiary, a doctor can be a witness. But if you think the stakes are even higher, take a psychiatrist certificate a day before and a day after. With that, I guess I come to the end of this. Once you have made the will, ideally you have to go to sub-registrar's office. Last Sunday also the question had come ki kitna cost hota uska. I don't have an answer to that. But to the best of my knowledge, it will be a very low cost. It will not be in proportion to your property. And with that, let me quickly summarize. So what we did was we discussed first the investment concepts, because we are having this discussion in the week of Investor Awareness Week. We spoke about asset classes. We saw that the decade belongs to India. We also saw that how much has changed in 40 years. And the reason I was giving so much stories was, of course, it's always good to make people nostalgic, but the reason I was giving all those stories of 40 years ago, क्योंकि अगर 40 साल में इतना बदल गया तो 100 साल पुराना सक्सेशन एक्ट तो बहुत ही अलग होता है. That's the point that I wanted to bring out. We spoke about the potential of mutual fund in terms of return, in terms of step up, in terms of compounding. We spoke about SIP, SWP and STP as tools. Finally, we discussed one part of succession planning, which is will writing. There are other parts to it also. Like I said, that my endeavor is to give you basic information so that you at least start the journey of writing the will and overcoming the hurdles like various gentlemen have here discussed. But once you get down to writing the will, and if you think the stakes are high, ideally you should take help of a practicing lawyer to do that, and you should get that will also registered. Apart from that, in succession planning, people who have minor children, उनके लिए एक legal guardianship letter भी होता है, where this is a separate document from will, where you decide if you have a minor children that in case me and my spouse don't survive, who will be the first right and the second right, etc., etc. All of that is also part of succession planning, but we actually touched upon will only in the succession planning. And with that, we are closing the session. You can avail the help of qualified financial advisors for details of that. Like I had said, wealth can be outsourced, health cannot be. For health, you have to cut down on your carbs, you have to cut down on your tobacco sticks, you have to cut down on your pecs and do your own workouts, right? So with that, I will thank my colleague Neha Goyani who managed all of this and arranged this session. I would also thank Chairman Sir and Vengankar Sir for giving this opportunity. Thank you.